Hi friends, Lorelei Black from Blade Broom, and this week I am going to talk with you about how to DIY your correspondences for your witchcraft and whether or not that might be a right fit for you. It's going to be for some people and it's not going to be for others. And for yet some other people, it's going to be a great fit in some circumstances and then maybe not in others. So let's jump into what that might look like. Okay, so when we're talking about correspondences in magic, we're talking about the way all the different pieces of your craft fit together. So we're talking about things like the days of the week and what kinds of magic would be appropriate to do on those days of the week. We're talking about the way color influences magic. We're talking about moon phases. We're talking about what kind of stones relate to the different properties of magic. We're talking about all of those things. What kind of tools are best for certain kinds of work and all of that. So what I'm not going to do is give you a laundry list or of what kinds of work each of those things does, or point you in the direction of books that say this, use this thing for that thing. Those books and tables and lists are all called tables of correspondences or lists of correspondences, and basically what they are, if you haven't come across them, or if you have come across them and are wondering what their purpose is, or how they were developed, is that they act as a cheat sheet, basically, to say that in some culture, at some point in time, they say that this thing, whether it was an animal, plant, mineral, was associated with this concept. Now, and that you can use that animal, plant, mineral tool in order to sympathetically or contagiously affect a concept or a person or what have you in order to affect change in the world. Now, okay, so sympathetic magic is the idea that like attracts like, or that like things affect other like things. So the color blue, for example, in many places in the world is associated with healing ideas, right? But that comes from a construct, a social construct, a cultural construct, and you got to dig into why that is, because if you have not bought into that particular construct, if you're just getting started with magic, you may very well be going, does it though? Why does blue have anything to do with healing? I've never associated blue with healing. I associate blue with spirits. I associate blue with ghosts. You know, if you're from the southern part of the US, for instance, I'll use this as an example right now. If you're from the southern part of the United States, you may very well associate the color blue with porch ceilings and the concept of haint blue and guarding against hauntings. So blue is not necessarily something that you think of as healing. It's something you think of as maybe a certain type of protection. And you're not wrong in that, right? You know, there's a whole cultural thing about that. And that's supported in other parts of the world. You see the little blue eyes that are the evil eyes. They're actually protection against the evil eye. And that's something that comes out of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And it has a long association as well. So the color of blue as protection, and you see that, you know, blue on the front door of the house. So what ends up happening is that what we need to do as practitioners of magic is dig deep into these associations for ourselves if they're going to be practical, and not just turn to books to tell us what these things mean. So on on some level, we need to do some DIY for our correspondences and not just look at lists that somebody else has made, because the lists only go so far. One of the things to understand about the lists and the correspondences, the tables of correspondences and how they work, is that a lot of them are based on some really, really old ancient traditions of magic, and they date back, for instance, to planetary correspondences. So it's not necessarily a recommendation that I would make to throw them out. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. What you may want to do is take a little bit of time just to understand what those planetary correspondences are, because most of Western magic is based on these ideas of planetary correspondences. So if you look at that piece and really kind of break it down for yourself, you can see what the rest is based on and then work from there. So I would start with that and just sort of give yourself a basic education in those planetary correspondences and then move forward. Another thing to do that I would highly recommend is to look at elemental correspondences and to make a list for yourself of the 4 elements, 5 elements if you work in a 5-element system, including spirit, that is, and to really take a look at where you place those elements within your circle or your compass, and what kinds of tools and herbs and stones and entities and all of the things that you associate with those elements, because that's a little different, or could be a little different, than what you associate with the planets. You might do both. For instance, you might make a list, make your own correspondences for the planets, and then you might make a list of the elements. It really sort of depends on what your magic looks like. Are you working with a more planetary based system, or are you working with a more elemental based system? And really that sort of just depends on your sense of the art magical, what kind of witch are you? Some of us really are sort of more elemental in our working, and we don't necessarily look to the planetary correspondences all that much. And others of us really get into that planetary correspondence, and we're planning our magic down to the planetary hour. For instance, we plan based on the day of the week, where it is within the lunar cycle, where it is within the solar cycle, where it is, even down, like I said, to the planetary hour. So those things have an influence naturally, but they definitely have an influence if you're thinking about them and if you are attuned to them and in line with them. So being aware of them and bringing that consciousness to your magic will inform and empower your magic. There is a wealth of knowledge and information about both planetary and elemental information out there, so it can be both inspiring and infuriating. So be prepared for that you can definitely dive down the rabbit hole on this. And you'll want to both be open academically and intuitively as you go down this process. Take breaks from it and let yourself just sort of be grounded as you're going through this. Ultimately, it's your practice, and you want something that is reflective of what speaks to you. To me, it's like opening up one of those dream interpretation books, and you're interested in seeing what a symbol means, but when you look at the symbol sets that they have and you don't connect with their interpretation, and it's because they're pulling from perhaps a culture that you don't relate to, or they're pulling from a psychological interpretation that is not based on your experience, those interpretations aren't going to be helpful for you. You have to look at what your connection to those symbols are and where your experience with those things is, because that's where your power lies. There are some long-standing and sort of, I would say almost universal or nearly universal accepted meanings to certain symbols because they've been in practice and in use for so long. But there are also some idiosyncratic meanings to symbols, and we have to be able to look at those in order to really dig deep into our work. Otherwise, it's somebody else's sorcery, it's somebody else's magic, it's somebody else's witchcraft. So I hope that this information has been useful for you, and I hope that you've gotten something from it. Let me know how it is that you go about this process and what you have found useful in your work and in your practice in the comments below. And subscribe, share, like, do all those things, and I look forward to seeing you here next week, Monday at noon. Bye, guys.